Hello everyone, I'm the Black Shirt and welcome back to Top 5, the series here on the channel where I'll be looking at a specific subject for Dune Imperium and I'll be giving you my 5 tips for how to improve your game. Continuing our look at the various leaders for Uprising, and today we have a look at the lady Margot Fenring, who has been the subject of much discussion as she is a 2-time winner of Grand Finals at the North Carolina Invitationals. So what's it all about? Lady Margot is wife to the Count Casimir, who I believe is actually featured on this channel before. I believe we played his custom leader in one of our streams and we were delving into that for Dune Imperium. But regardless, Margot is a member of the Bene Gesserit order, which means that she's got some pretty cute little skills and abilities she's picked up over the course of time. As for her rendition here in Uprising, she's kind of an interesting one in a way. As far as leader simplicity gets, she is basically as simple as you could physically get here, but that does not mean that she's a weak leader by any stretch of the imagination. While she is principally a solid deck builder, able to target good cards early to mid game, she can turn into a real nasty fighter late on and can definitely manage to kind of culminate her deck and her strategy, so she can be an absolute real force in rounds 6, 7, and 8 especially, when the other war leaders have kind of exhausted themselves going after each other, and then Margot just comes in and just absolutely sweeps at the end. Very, very strong leader. One that I admittedly haven't had the chance to use a ton. Maybe I should do more. But let's have a look at her in a bit more detail. So first up, let's have a look at her passive ability, Loyalty. Whenever you reach 2 influence with the Bene Gesserit, you gain 2 spice. Again, it is outrageously simple. There's nothing fancy to it. There's no crazy conditions. There's no, oh, you lose a card out your deck stuff. Just straightforward, get 2 persuasion of the Bene Gesserit and you're off. You get your windfall. Really, really nice. This passive obviously definitely does encourage going for the Bene Gesserit early, especially the espionage space. And this is a space I want to highlight here very specifically. This is a very important space, not just for I would say, for Margot. There's quite a few leaders that very much like to get here. Lady Jessica, if she's in the game, absolutely wants to get here. Fader Alpha, if he's in the game, it's not uncommon to see him putting his spy onto the espionage spot just to keep going back here and again and again. And realistically, most people want to get back here. If anyone pulls the Bene Gesserit operative card from the Imperium row, this is a spot they want to get to as well. So this is a very highly competitive spot, and it is pretty important for Margot as well. You think that 2 spice windfall pays for your trips to espionage. Basically, they're on the house. One quick technicality note before we move on is that Loyalty, very similar to Irulan, which we'll talk about later on in this series, you can actually reacquire this passive influence. If you are at 2 influence and you've already claimed this ability, if Margot ever drops down below that and then goes back up to that value, you get that bonus again. So there are ways with like the Captured Mentat card, Change Allegiances, Intrigue, stuff like that, Opportunism maybe as well. There are a few ways to actually drop Persuasion with different factions, and so yeah, that's a thing you can do. If you manage to find a way to drop back down here and get back up, however you do that, you can actually get that spice generation going again, which is a nice little touch. It's not a big deal for Margot. I think for Irulan it's probably a little bit more substantive because that plays for the Emperor track. Talk about that in a future video, but it is worth noting that you can do that. So hey, maybe you can find some bonus resources. It'd be pretty nice. Change Allegiances especially, maybe Loyalty just straight pays for that. It's pretty nice. So the third tip for this is going to be talking about Margot's ring, Arrakis Informant. Again, really, really, really straightforward. You play the ring, you can get a spy onto an unoccupied city spot. Very simple, and again, very, very effective. There are some catches, however, to this ability. First off, of course, if we go to the map, you'll realize that there is actually only 3 places this spy can ever go, which isn't actually a lot. If you're playing the 6-player game, there is a 4th spot available for Carthag, but we're not really talking about that here. Margot, you got 3 choices for your ring, and the most obvious choice you'll be going for, especially in the early game, is going to be the Arrakeen spy here. This is probably the one you're going to be using the vast majority of your time here with Margot. The other 2 are a bit more strategic. We'll talk about those in a moment. But yeah, we'll talk about Arrakeen for now. This gives you access to Spice Refinery, which is nice, but it's mainly the Arrakeen spot here. This is what you want to get for Margot. This is great for all sorts of reasons. First of all, if you've got your spy and you're managing to put it down there, well, for starters, you're always threatening to go to Arrakeen to deploy troops. Because Carthag now no longer exists, Arrakeen is a fairly common deployment spot for harassing and getting entry into combat. And with that spy there, you can go there pretty much whenever you want. Very, very strong. But the thing that pairs up really nicely with Margot is the fact that you can combine this with Arakeen's draw of a card here, and that means if you decide to go early, well, you can double draw off of Arakeen, which can be really effective if you're digging for like a Spice Must Flow or a big 7-8 coster card. You can look to do that very effectively. Very, very powerful indeed. Now, there are some caveats to this, which I do want to mention. First of all, astute and experienced players of this game will know that Margot will want to put this spy on the Arakeen spot the vast majority of the time, because it is very, very powerful and effective for her. And what you can do even is like put your spy down at Arakeen, and then what you're basically doing is you send your ring to Arakeen, reclaim the spy, and then put the spy right back down, and just keep this constantly blocked, an option for Margot. Now, admittedly, in the early game, there's not a lot of ways people are generating spies, and if they are going to be putting spies down, it's typically going to be either to faction spaces, or High Council, or Hager Base, and that sort of thing. So you don't need to worry about this getting blocked by your opponents too much early game, but once you can sort of get into like round 3, round 4, round 5, if you leave this unattended, I've done it a couple of times as battle leaders when Margot's in the game, is I've just punt a spy right there, and I just leave it there for the rest of the game, and it makes Margot's life really awkward because her ring is very much reliant on Arakeen as that kind of guaranteed space, so you've got to be a little bit cautious of this. We'll talk about the other two spots as well here. I think the next popular spy, typically from my experience, tends to be the Siege to Beer spy. This obviously can be really good if you're managing to get hold of your throwing access, maybe sort of like round 3, round 4, but there's a lot of competition for this space to get your make hooks so you can get into combat. Obviously, this allowing you guaranteed access to Siege, which is pretty important usually for tempo, trying to get your hooks, maybe to get ready for going for makers the following round. Also gives you access to Research Station as well, which is not a space to be slept on at all for Margot. Being able to go here for 2 water for 2 troops and 3 card draws by pulling up one of your spies, because you're not usually infiltrating this space mid-game, can be really powerful. But of course, late game, people will put in their leftover water here trying to find Spice Must Flow. So having a spy on either of these spots is pretty effective. In the midst of all this, I haven't really talked too much about Spice Refinery too much, and I don't find that gets used a ton. Although I do think actually getting a spy to either one of these locations and using this maybe like round 2 or round 3, not a bad strategy for Margot. I haven't really tried it too much, is maybe even considering like very first turn going to say like Hager Basin with your signet ring so that you can put a spy either to Arakeen or one of these 2 spots here, and then what you're doing with your 2 spies is one of those spies to espionage, so you can get your spy down there and then obviously guarantee your access to espionage a little bit later on into the game, and then your other spice is going to Spice Refinery, which of course you've guaranteed access to, so you're generating your money so you can look to get that towards Swordmaster. There is definitely a bit of free crafting to be done about Margot and a couple of different ways you can approach it, but if you want an unorthodox move to try out, maybe that's one. And of course, if you're going here to take that spice, it means there's no bonus spice being generated later on, so if someone looks like they're going to get to make Siege and Hager Basin round 2 pretty much guaranteed, you're at least stunting them from getting extra spice on the side. Next up, let's talk about seat position for the 4th tip here. Now, I haven't truthfully played a ton of Margot myself. When I first kind of saw her, she reminded me a little bit of kind of Uprising's answer to Helena Chess in the base game, and as I've talked about in a couple of videos and streams, I don't particularly enjoy playing Helena because she just doesn't really suit my general strategy. I tend to play kind of a rather faction-heavy strategy, which Helena didn't really suit. And you could argue that Margot kind of is sort of the same. You know, obviously a lot of her focus is making sure you're getting access to Arakeens, these sort of things. So I don't have a ton of experience physically playing her. But from what I've seen and what I've kind of studied, I think she's kind of okay most places to sit down on the table. I think she's pretty good for sort of like mid positions, like 2nd or 3rd seat. I think 3rd seat actually is pretty good for her, especially because it gives you those options, again, of like deciding if you want to go like spies to espionage early, you can do that. The issue I'd have with Margot getting earlier in the chain is that you're getting more and more dragged into fighting and not really knowing how much to commit. If you're in these first 2 seats, you're kind of, there's a degree of obligation to be hitting Fremkit or Desert Tactics, which isn't great for Margot. Water is really important for you. You want to get that spice together together so you can hit the Bene Gesserit, get Wonderful back, and start kind of accelerating that course. And getting stuck into combat is not necessarily going to help you do that. So while I don't think she's that reliant on seat position overall, I think it's more important for her to know who your opposition is likely to be in the table. As I've mentioned, if you've got Fade Ralpha, Staban, for example, and those other sort of style spy leaders on the table, that is going to make your life a lot more difficult for Margot. And Jessica, I think, does count it as well, because of the power of getting the spy here to espionage and constantly recycling that just to get card draw and be challenged to alliance is really, really effective. So if Margot, if there's a lot of spy leaders out, maybe you might decide you need to go Hagar Basin or Imperial Basin just to get espionage straight away. But the problem is that Phaedra Alpha can literally turn one, go anywhere he wants with his ring, and just put a spy there. And then you have a problem, because this is a pretty good spot for you, and you're going to have to change your strategy a lot there. So be very wary of Fade Ralpha if Margot is in the game and you're playing as her, which is kind of funny when you think about the source material. So, for my 5th wildcard tip here, I would say for Margot it's the fact that you have a surprising amount of synergy and flexibility with the Imperium row cards that are available that a lot of leaders just simply don't possess. Margot can do a lot of cool stuff with a lot of kind of quirky and unusual cards in a way, and make some that are really strong even better. Because Margot obviously is putting down spies, it means that she gets use of all the spy cards that are dotted about, especially those that rely on either giving advantages, be it with resources, faction bumps, but also those that are beneficial for having on combat spaces. Of course, all the cities are deployable, so obviously your natural cards like Strike Fleet and Public Spectacle, which are some of the strongest cards anyways, are even better with her because you're getting that guaranteed access and that reliable spy generation as well. Strike Fleet to Arakeen is it's a problem. However, there's also a lot of other cards that are also pretty good for her as well. Imperial Spy Master is a deceptively good card for her. Again, being able to reliably send this to the spies you're putting down to generate those intrigues can be pretty good. Although, again, be wary of the Spy on Arakeen, because obviously this won't necessarily put it back there, so you've got to be a touch careful about that. Another card that is an absolute cornerstone of Margot is the Rebel Supplier. This is one of her best cards in a way because it's not that great for anyone else, generally speaking, but for Margot, amazing card. If you send this to a space and recall it, you get +2 troops. So the obvious compatibility of Rebel Supplier to the likes of Arakeen or Research Station is just, it's right there in front of you. And this is what is a real tricky card for players in the mid-game or even later on. Being able to turn those spies you put down and you've put in to just masses of forces, you just flood the field of your troops for those big round 7 and 8 conflicts, can really turn the tide for you. And again, because this is a card that not a lot of people really take, if it turns up in the Imperium row, you can feel fairly safe a lot of the time that it won't be pinched. The only exception I would say to this is, fun enough, it's actually Irulan. I had a game in the North Carolina Invitational where I was playing against Ryan from Man vs. Meeple, and both Rebel Suppliers are actually in the Imperium row. He greedily didn't take either of them, expecting them to stay in the row, and what ended up happening, someone else revealed and took one of them because I think they were like Staban or something, and then I actually was playing Irulan and took the other one. For Irulan, it's a pretty bad card. I'm not really doing much of it. I literally bought it, A, so I could trash it later on for 2 spies of her ring, and B, because all the suppliers are out. And if Margot doesn't find any of these cards, you definitely feel it when you're playing as her. Very good card for her. Rebel Supply also plays into the various cards that are dotted about that only have city access, which can be a bit tricky for some players, but for her are a lot stronger. It's a bit similar to Helena, for example, of the old days because of that guaranteed city access, the same kind of deal. So a card like Conquest of Power, for example, really effective for her because, again, you've got that guaranteed access, that trashing on the side is really nice. It's also a pretty solid reveal. But then you've got other options as well. You know, make a keeper here for the Fremen. You're going to be going for that Bene Gesserit influence pretty quickly, and that Fremen you get eventually, so this is a great resource generator. Same thing for Northern Watermaster as well. Getting that guaranteed consistent water generation is really powerful. This lets you get to Research Station, and later on you get access to the sort of siege, deep desert stealing, that sort of thing. very powerful. The one other card I will point out here as well, you got Paracompass. This is also pretty good. Again, that passive Solar generation is nice. That way you can start getting Margot targeting Imperial Privilege and High Council. If you've got stuff like Corinth City in your deck, that also pays for that. And the last one that I will point out as well is the Branching Path. This is a very good card for Margot because it's everything that you want. Bene Gesserit access for espionage, city access for your spies, and once you get the Bene Gesserit alliance, being able to trash intrigues that are not that good for you into a fresh one, and the extra spice is just, it's self-fulfilling, and it's really, really good. So definitely, if you're playing as Margot, or you're looking at it, if this card is on the opening row, and if you can get it, by all means do. This could be really good. Not a victory point generator like Junction Headquarters can do, or the other one, which like Corinth City, which I mentioned earlier, but the whole trashing it an intrigue for a redraw is a very good mechanic in this game. There's a reason that made Imperial Privilege more expensive. Very deceptively good skill. So that's going to be my top 5 for Margot. On the face of it, pretty straightforward, pretty simple to go, but she has a deceptive amount of flexibility and license to do a lot of stuff on the battlefield and just the game in general, which I guess kind of suits her pretty well. That's going to do it, though, for this video. Of course, if you like what we do here on Hidden Assets, please feel free to support and follow the channel. It'll be hugely appreciated. We'll be back with more for the top 5 series next time, looking at Amber Metelli. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.